Today, we'll be talking about emotions with our guest, Kim Korte. Kim is a sensory perception and emotion management strategist who weaves her curiosity about emotional awareness with her decades of experience in the world of business consulting. She has created the idea of the emotion chef based on her own experience and the awareness that as leaders, partners, parents, or just as a citizen of the world, our self-awareness is tied directly to our ability to manage our emotions. A significant emotional event created the perfect storm for Kim to begin questioning, how do I keep this from happening to me again? Now, that is, of course, of great interest to me. What was that perfect storm that ignited this work you're doing now?
Well, we all have a little bit of baggage from when we were young, right? I had some things happen to me as a young girl that should not happen. And I also was raised with a mother who was an alcoholic and subsequently died of it when I was 30. And, that kind of sets you up. There was a few things too. It's like emotions and feelings weren't just talked about. In fact, they were kind of pushed under the rug. And I do believe that's generational, but that's kind of what I lived with. And then I met him and married this man and put him through school and thought he was the love of my life. We had two businesses together, and I actually gave up my career so that we could pursue these businesses so that we could retire and, just have this fantastic rest of our life. Only to have him cheat on me with our friend and someone who worked for us, and it just left me devastated. And I think that I met him right after my mom had died, and I had been emotionally reeling from that experience, and then just here I am now put back into another horrible experience when I thought he was the person who had rescued me from all of my misery. I literally was laying on the floor of my condo in San Diego and said, I can't let this happen to me again. And that started me on this quest. And it began with just examining my balance, which is what my first book is about. And it's about creating balance in relationships because I realized like I had none and I was my happiest when I had balance. And I created this symbol, a Venn-shaped diagram in the shape of a heart that I would use to examine my balance in relationships. But that was just really getting started. And it wasn't until I read this book called How Emotions Are Made, The Secret Life of the Brain by Lisa Feldman Barrett, where it was just like, boom, boom, this all makes sense. Because of my business background and what I did as a consultant, I was able to recognize a repeatable process that made so much sense. And that process is that we take in ingredients from the outside world. And this isn't just Lisa Feldman Barrett. This is just a fact that we take in ingredients from the outside world, be it through our eyes, through our ears, through sense of touch, what we smell, what we taste. And the brain has to do something with it, and it makes a prediction. And our predictions are based on our past experience. So, sensory perception, what we take in, is our ingredient, and our recipes are our past experiences. So, how do we taste them? And that came along later, in the book, but also I understood it much more when I read Molecules of Emotions. And that is, we feel inside of our bodies because we have another sensory system called interoception. So think about it as interception or catching your feelings, but you just put an O in there. So interoception is how we catch our feelings, and our ability to taste or connect to those feelings is what gives us our greater ability to recognize our emotions, which leads to greater resilience.
That's really very interesting because, of course, we all are human beings and we are emotional beings. How do we find disciplined thought and how do we control our emotions, because sometimes a simple thing would say trigger anger, like a traffic jam, and we don't know where that's coming from. Totally out of proportion to an incident, for instance.
So there's a few factors that I have learned through my endeavors. And one of those is what mood are we in? How are we taking care of our bodies? Are we already in a bad place? Have we been holding a lot of emotions down so that we're not acknowledging them? We're pushing them down so any small thing triggers us because we have so much energy pushing those down. I mean, that's a known thing. And then the fact that our physical state is completely tied to our emotional state, are the mood that we carry, how we respond in a certain situation. Um, a lot of that has to do with how we are feeling physically. So the thing with feelings is they come in two flavors. And I always use flavor because the emotion chef, right? So we have the feelings that are homeostatic. So when you are feeling hungry, that's an emotion. When you're feeling the urge to use the restroom, that is the same thing. It's an emotion. And we use love is emotion, but so is heartburn. I mean, it's all communication. It's the brain sending us signals, to say, hey, or the body sending us signals to say, hey, you need to pay attention to this. And it's done through this interoceptive system. So we can get confused with our feeling of being super tired with our feeling of being irritated or maybe being hungry and being sad. I love to give this example because I just saw it not too long ago in a video someone posted. This man actually took a video of his daughter crying and she was just bawling and bawling. And he's like, "Why are you so sad?" And she's like, "Oh, I don't know." And she was just crying, crying. She goes, "I think I'm gonna get something to eat and watch my favorite TV show." So he takes the camera to her later and she's happy and she's eating and watching her show. But he had taken her tears and said, "You're sad." And then she took care of that quote unquote sadness by going to eat and watching TV, when really what she was hungry. And I think a lot of us get these emotions confused, confusing the affective emotions like sad or angry with the homeostatic ones like tired or hungry.
So there's those emotions that come from, say, past trauma, but can we differentiate where the positive and the negative or toxic emotions come from? Because obviously, if we have a positive emotion like love, that comes from a different level than hate or anger.
It's funny because we look at emotions positive and negative when even love can be negative. Empathy can be negative. People don't think, like, how can that be negative? But you can be so empathetic to a person or a group that you are not showing the correct compassion or attention to another person or group. We think of empathy, we think of these things as being positive, but they can actually be negative when we give love to the wrong people, when we, show empathy to a person or a group, so much so that we ignore the needs of others. So it's about finding balance and about finding the right ingredient or the right emotion for the right time and understanding, like, what is making me feel this way? What are the ingredients? What is going on around me? And the other thing to remember is that negative emotions also serve a purpose. Fear serves a purpose. It can keep us safe. It's all a matter of having the right emotion at the right time that is beneficial for us and recognizing what has to happen for me to feel fear. Like, it might not even be anything that's relevant, and it might not even be truly a fearful situation. So when you think about these situations, fear or love, it's really about what is creating it. And is it true? Is it really truly a place for love or a place for fear? in the situation. And it takes being mindful and looking at the perceptions, because there's two things that go on. We have what's called the brain predicts everything, what we see, what we hear, all of this, right? And it can make mistakes. It's called prediction error, and we're the only ones who can correct the prediction error. If it also,
So for example, if you love the wrong person, the person obviously not being the right person for you,
mhm.
would that fall in that category?
Yes, I would say it would, because if you look at what it takes for you to feel love, you might be feeling love for the wrong type of person. So you're predicting this is a situation of love when you can't recognize that this is not a loving situation. Think about the various degrees of love. So there's infatuation, there's passion, there's all different kinds of emotions that go around love. And we might not be recognizing a crush or an infatuation, and we might recognize it as love when it's really not what necessarily love is. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
There's
yeah.
it's just like a pepper. There's things that have
Mhm.
different various ingredients of sweetness. It's understanding and being able to distinguish that. But also, like I said, going back to it, it's so important for us to understand what needs to happen for us to feel love. And in my book that I wrote, Yucky, Yummy, Savory, Sweet, Understanding the Flavors of Emotions, I give an exercise where you can kind of delve into your own head is what has to happen for you to feel whatever, if it's fear or love or whatever these major emotions that you want to get more insight into, you start to see like, wow, like that doesn't make sense. But it's just coming from these old recipes that we've got, but that doesn't mean we can't change them. And it
Mhm.
doesn't mean that we can't create new ones. So it's really about being intentional in our emotions, because we are the chef of them. Whereas, yes, it's our brain, but we are the ones who can say, this is what this set of circumstances. And
Mhm.
love looks like this. It doesn't look like that.
Mhm. So it's basically understanding yourself and your response to certain situations.
Yes, and not being afraid of emotions and understanding that you can get them wrong. And that to me is it's humbling, because your brain can mispredict, or we have old recipes that we haven't really examined, and think about it. My grandmother, she's from I'm in the United States, and she comes from Arkansas, and she made her cornbread with lard. Everything she had was just so unhealthy. And yet that's how they cooked. And we today live in a much healthier environment. And so to remain healthy uh, physically and emotionally, we need to examine our diet physically and emotionally. And that's pretty much the point of the book, is examining what is your emotional diet and what are you consuming, and how are you labeling it? Is there a better way to consume them? And for the most part, I'd say most of us can do a better job at it
Mhm.
and examining them and not being afraid of them.
Yeah, it's a lovely analogy, the food ingredients and emotions, because I'm convinced that what you feed your brain with, your thoughts with, that you become. And a lot of us find ourselves trapped in the social media world that, of course, thrives on toxic emotions. And we know
Yes.
that especially those feeds that have a negative message, a negative messaging, have the most clicks, have the most likes, and are disseminated the most. So how do we protect ourselves? How do we uh, find a balance? You call this a balance of emotions.
Well, it takes conscious thought, right? It takes examining the situation and questioning it. And I think curiosity kills fear. It really does. And in the book, I talk about how we go from fear to caution to curiosity. When you critically think about what these people are, or social media types are saying, and that can be even the news, right? Like, is that true? And while you can't go deep into everything, you can't, if you are afraid, you are igniting a chemical response. You know, your nervous system has and your body, it will release cortisol, and cortisol makes you focus like this. It's like putting blinders on, because if you're in the forest and you see all these trees and a bear comes, you're not going to see anything but the bear. But if you're curious, you're going to widen the scope and see more of the situation and allow to take that information in. And the thing about emotions is that most of, like, if you think about an experience that you've had, you remember what took place and how you felt about it. You might come up with some things you were thinking at the time, but initially it's what took place and how you feel. And that's what gets launched. Our emotions drive most of our thoughts versus our thoughts driving our emotions. It's conscious thoughts that is what changes our recipes and changes how we respond in the future. And that's really what this is about, right? This is about trying to change our response and to recognize our emotions more quickly. It's kind of like a chef who is trained can take a sip of a dish and say, oh, yes, there's too much of this, not enough of this. They can recognize the ingredients of that dish, and they can look at a dish and name it because they are so skilled in it. And that's the difference. When we just say, oh, we feel fine, we can't really tell you why we feel fine. We don't know anything, but I'm just fine. I'm good. But when we can get more distinct in our emotions, labeling them, to have that variation between love, even with fear, to have, or anger, to have irked or irritated or irate. I mean, trying to be appropriate to this situation, but consciously thinking about the situation that's taking place ahead of you, in front of you, rather.
Yeah, yeah.
Does
So,
that make sense?
yeah, that makes sense. Defining the nuances of the different emotions, and I think also the authenticity of accepting an emotion. You're not supposed to be angry. You have to be like this, like this. Where children, in the course of growing up, lose their authenticity and their curiosity.
It's so underutilized. It really, really is. Can I tell a story really quickly that shows you the power of curiosity? And I tell this in my book. It's a Buddhist monk is walking down a country path, and he spies something long and coiled, and he thinks to himself, it's a snake. And then he says, it's a poisonous snake. So he went right to fear, just straight to fear. Then he sits there and thinks to himself, well, or stands there, and he's like, what am I going to do? If I go back, it's going to get dark. It's already starting to get dark. Like, how am I going to get home? This is the only path back to the village. And then he makes a torch of sorts, and he brings it up closer. So now he's getting curious, and he's going towards this snake, quote unquote, cautiously. And he looks and he sees it's a piece of rope. He didn't expect a piece of rope because it's a country path. What would you see that look coiled? A snake. So his brain predicted a snake, but it was actually a piece of rope. And it was only because he didn't let his fear stop him that he got a little curious and approached cautiously, that he was able to recognize it as a rope. Now, what would have happened? If he had gone back, he would have been filled with fear every time he took that path in the future. He also would have told many in his village, be careful, there's a snake in this path, and everybody would have been filled with fear. And the whole time it was a rope. And so this is the power of curiosity. This is the power of saying, okay, let me cautiously approach this. Let me look, because now he knows that in this path he takes, there could be a snake and there could be a rope. And if he'd been trained as a snake handler, from a family of snake handlers, he would have known, like, oh, that's not a snake. So this is the power of being able to examine and have that developed emotional granularity, as it's called, is because you're able to recognize your emotions, your situations, your snakes more quickly, but it also gives you that ability, less fear and more curiosity about your feelings will help you to examine them.
Great example, this Buddhist story, because the Dalai Lama wrote so much about this topic of emotions, especially on anger, where he says that anger destroys your inner peace and distorts your view of reality, which
Yes.
I find so interesting when those emotions overwhelm you, that you don't see the world as it really is.
Right, right. That's going back to the high cortisol, the narrowing of the focus, and not being able to see the full picture. And uh, it's a problem today. Don't you agree? Every time I see, someone get angry, I think to myself, oh, you're focusing on one thing, and it's hard to step back and say how I feel. But once you get in the habit, it's been life-changing for me. I mean, honestly, I have had my sister say, "You're different." Like I have changed. I had some business coach that I engaged, and he said, "You're probably one of the most self-aware people that I've ever met." My chiropractor. I mean, there's physical benefits when you're more in tune with your body because, like I said, emotions, the emotions that get created either homeostatic or, be it pain or hunger, or be it, like I said, love or hate, it shows in your physicality too, because like I'll be at my doctor, I'm like, well, you know what, I think this little bit, and he's like, I've never had anyone who knows their body so well as you. And it's that I'm connected to it. I am connected. And that's what my book is about, is developing that connection. Because when you are connected to the you inside, it helps you to connect to the world around you.
So many studies show us that emotions out of balance influence longevity, have a
Mhm.
huge influence on heart circulatory disease.
There's a whole new uh, field of study. It's not really new, but it's relatively new when you think about medicine. It's called effective immunology. And they know now that for every emotional state, there is a immediate effect to your immunity system, your immune system. So yeah, it's huge.
What would you say about techniques such as breathing exercises, meditation, yoga, which are often proclaimed as some of some methods or techniques to balance emotions?
But what it really is doing is it's calming the body down. So remember when I said that, we live in much more of a stressful state than, I don't know, ever. It seems like to me, but maybe not. Everyone always thinks that now is different from any other time. There's a mechanism in the body, a natural mechanism where when you breathe out longer than you breathe in, it slows the heart rate down. So it's called respiratory sinus arrhythmia. And your nervous system is balanced when you do this, but also this inhaling and then exhaling longer will calm the body down. And it's really about just giving your body time just to be. We don't realize that, like, originally we probably had way more downtime than being addicted to TV or social media, or what is our attention rate now? I just heard on the news 45 seconds is our attention rate. I'm not going to say me, but I'm just going to say the average attention rate because of social media. So this is getting our system calm and not having a popcorn brain, and just allowing it to find its coherence, body coherence. And that is so good for you physically, but it also allows your mind to connect to you. We we're being talked to all the time, but we're listening too much to the wrong voices and not connecting and paying attention enough to the voice that's inside of our head and learning how to improve that language.
Yes, indeed, with so many distractions pulling at us all the time, especially if we spend too much time watching TV or in the social media world, where so many minds are being captured by different interest groups, I believe, and so important to find that space for inner peace, to find that balance.
And
But
isn't that what yoga does, though? I mean,
yeah.
all of this, it's all about the breath work. And like I said, Harvard just did a study. It's called cyclic breathing, and you breathe in and take an extra breath of air, and then you breathe out super slowly for a long time. And they said if you're in like a lot of stress during the day, if you did that just twice, in an hour or every few hours, it's just so good for your body. But it's not just good for your body, it's good for your mind. It's good for your thoughts. So if you're having a problem with your thoughts, it could be just your physical state, and you just need to calm it down. Because otherwise, you can get stuck in this cortisol producing state, and it's hard to get out of, because even at rest it can be producing cortisol because it's just used to it.
Mhm.
So you got to find ways to break it. Exercise does that. Yoga, meditation, breathing exercises, it's all good for you.
Yeah, what I do is if I take my dog out for a walk in nature here on the island in Mallorca, I'm in a completely different space within minutes.
And not all of us have that capability. But the fun thing about our little brain is that it doesn't really know where it's at or where we're at, so to speak. It just knows what we give it. So if we just close our eyes and go to a time or a place or a spot in our heads that, you're locked up in your office and you can't go outside, just do it in your head, and that will help.
Uh, Tell us more about the three things that your readers take from the three most important things that your readers could take from your book, called Yucky, Yummy, Savory, Sweet, Understanding the Flavors of Emotions.
Yes, that we aren't always right. Feelings feel like facts, but they're not. Our thoughts seem like facts, but they're not. So if we have that allowance to to understand how our brain uh, perceives things based on our physical state, based on our past experiences, because it's just trying to keep us alive and healthy and safe, right? And I have some videos that are on my website that show you how we get our perceptions wrong. So when we have that state of humility, when we could put our ego aside, it really helps us to fine tune our emotions, and that we can be the masters of our emotions when I'm not going to even say masters. I'm going to take that word back. We can be better at it because we have so many things that I call it the secret sauce that interrupt our abilities, be it physical conditions, disease states, uh, things that are beyond DNA. But when we are more proactive in creating our recipes, examining our recipes, that self-awareness is the key to resilience and to creating a life that we want to lead physically and emotionally. And the last one, I think, is really back to that topic of curiosity. And that can't be underrated enough because it allows us to look beyond the obvious. And why we can't take in everything, we have 11 million bits of information that come every second. We are conscious of 124 bits of that. So just know that there's a lot that we don't know, but that when we are curious and we build our connection, we get comfortable with our emotions, we build that internal relationship with ourselves, that this gives us the a better intuition, it gives us better instincts, and it gives us a better ability to make good decisions in our life.
And basically regaining control of your life, making your life more beautiful.
Yes, absolutely. Because it's all a prediction anyway. As much as we don't want to believe it, that it really is. You can look at a situation and it can be the worst situation in the world, or it could be the best situation in the world. I look at my niece. She has autism, and I talk a lot about her in my book because it's so important. They're handicapped interoceptively. Their ability to connect to the feelings inside of their body is hindered just because of what they're given. And so she she lives in this house that has so many things wrong with it, but she doesn't see any of that. She just sees how great she loves her room. She loves where she lives. It's not the nicest place, but she loves it. Perception.
Yeah,
And
like my
we have
yeah,
more role in
yeah,
that.
yeah. My nephew is a Downs kid, and much the same thing. The child is so authentic.
Yes, yes. And they see beyond, what we can see. So at times they just can. And it's what we focus on. Focus is everything. If you want to focus on a bad life, that's what you're going to get. So we get more of it because our brain thinks we're looking for it.
Exactly. Yes. So, Kim, how can people connect with you?
I am on social media, mostly Instagram, YouTube. I'm really trying to build up my YouTube platform and my website. So on Instagram and YouTube, I'm at the Kim Korte, and my website is kimkorte.com, KIMKORTE.com. And then, of
And
course, my book is on Amazon, but
mhm.
you can link to my book from my website.
Okay, we'll post all those links in the show notes below. Uh,
Thank you.
you have a great message, and so important
Oh,
in our
thank you.
times these days where we are pulled into so many different directions, and where grievance culture seems to be so dominant, and emotions seem so out of control. And finding that balance, I think, is so important. Thank you very much for being on our show, Kim.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It was such a pleasure to speak with you. You're such a great host. I appreciate you very much.